Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Way is in Training. This is a podcast exploring how warriors should train and fight, as well as how they should live. We will talk about technique, but we'll also dive deep into fitness, mindset, and strategy. We will explore leadership and philosophy as well. So whether you are a young soldier, a veteran police officer, a responsible armed citizen, or simply someone looking for an authentic life, let's examine how the lessons of combat and preparation for it can help us fulfill our potential. Let's explore the way together and learn how the discipline of training can show us our true selves amidst the chaos of life. Hey everybody, on this episode I've got Kerry Murakami of Rectitude Training, retired law enforcement, martial artist, combatives and firearms instructor, a guy that's doing some really cool things in the combatives defensive tactics space for officers. So real quick, before we get too far into the weeds, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you're doing?
Hey, thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me on. My name is Kerry Murakami. Everybody calls me Kato. I did a 28-year career in law enforcement in the Chicagoland area, primarily in the north suburbs. I was an FTO, firearms instructor, scenario-based training instructor, and I'm pretty much known for the defensive tactics side. Jiu-jitsu black belts. Actually, I just received my combatives black belt, which is a true honor. But I'm primarily known for the DT side and the scenario-based training side. So the last 10 years of my career, I was really focused on implementing new content, new tactics within my agency. And I had kind of used some of the combatives background that I had. So the first thing I actually started with was team tactics and, Cliff Byerly. And, I basically, picked his brain. He showed me maybe like a 2-minute primer of what he does and what he used. I brought it back to my agency. They loved it. Kind of fast forward into 2020, when the world flips upside down. There were 3 incidences that really pushed me into creating my own business. The first one was the Chicago Red Line shooting. 2 officers had a hard time controlling one bad guy. The bad guy escaped, went up the escalator. They shot the guy. The second one was George Floyd. And then the third was Rashard Brooks, which is a Wendy's DUI case, where 2 officers couldn't control one bad guy. There was a theft, or, the bad guy took the guy's taser. There was a taser battle, and then they eventually shot this guy. I felt that with what we were doing at my old agency, especially with the team tactics, at least locally, I could kind of make my little dent in law enforcement training. So August of 2020, I started Rectitude Training. Right after that, I managed to get hooked up with a large risk management agency. They cover about 70 different entities in and around the Chicagoland area. And they liked what I had to say. They liked the evidence of what we were doing, meaning low injuries during training, low injuries during street encounters, and low injuries to bad guys, essentially, too. A year later, I got myself state certified. I saw the writing on the wall because the state had these mandates. They were really pushing hard on the training mandates. And I figured if I don't get my stuff state certified, the training business is going to be pretty much done. So, that's pretty much the rundown on me and my training company. Again, 95% of my work is with law enforcement. I'm looking to actually push outward into the civilian market, kind of with the poking and prodding of Cliff and Craig Douglas. I see the writing on the wall. I really need to push outwards. So yeah, that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
And if any of my listeners don't know who Cliff Byerly or Craig Douglas are, if you're martial artists, you need to figure out who they are, whether you're civilian or not. If you're law enforcement, just go take a class. Actually, if you're civilian, just go take a class.
Yeah.
Pretty much whoever you are, go take a class.
Absolutely. Those guys are gems. A couple years ago, I don't even remember, a handful of years ago, the Combatives Association was formulated and started on Facebook, and jumped on there, and I really liked kind of what they were doing. What meant like, I used to be a pretty voracious podcast consumer. I kind of still am, but it's tapered off a little bit because I used to be in a patrol car for 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
You get to hit pause or play whenever. So, like listening to what these guys have to say. And I'm not, I don't have a great memory, so I have to, consume stuff multiple times before I actually get something out of it or remember it. So,
what were we talking about? We were talking about TBIs before we started.
Yeah, I got a little bit of that, just a little.
So what I love, I mean, both those guys are great. Cliff is not super local to me, but relatively local to me. So I've had him in classes. Just a gem of a guy. It's like old school police, but no ego. Just solid dude. And Craig, man, I think I pay as much attention to Craig's posts on sartorial excellence and mixing the perfect cocktail as I do to his posts on how to fight. He's like the redneck James Bond. It is amazing.
I love both those guys. I have a hint of Cliff in the respect I kind of don't care about people's opinions, and if I hurt your feelings, then you know what, it only comes from the heart. I mean it, but I don't really, it's not. I'm not trying to hurt your feelings. It just kind of comes out that way. I also get that kind of from. I grew up in the city of Chicago, and where I went to school, grade school, was just outside Cabrini Green, and we played Yo Mama jokes every day.
Oh yeah.
I was a small little Asian kid in primarily a half white, half black school, and it was kind of like the token, one of the tokens Asians, and so if you kind of didn't fit in with one of the two groups, like you were kind of outcasted, and I learned to kind of navigate my way through all that. So, you won't insult me if I tell guys all the time when we're doing debriefs, like, please give me the honest truth. If there's anybody who can take it, it's me for sure.
So like I'm probably even too far that way just because of like some of the things I did in my life. Like I only caused a handful of international incidents. It's not like it was a huge number, right? And that's like there's long stories there. Like, because I've been like chewed out by British ambassadors, right? Like when a boss in the police department would yell at me, a higher rank than me, inside my head I was always like, you do realize this doesn't faze me, right? Like I'll do what you want me to do. I have no problem being a good soldier, but all this yelling and stuff, I'm like, you've been doing this to me since I was 18, like at a much higher level than this. It's having no effect.
Yeah, I've had that in other environments, in the martial arts, like you do comp training or something like that, and they're yelling at you, and you're like, you realize I'm a grown ass man, and like you're yelling at me for no fucking reason. Like, go take it out on the kid over there because it's not affecting me at all.
Yeah, I hope you're enjoying this because it's not really doing anything.
Yeah, that was like the police academy, I went to Chicago Police Academy, and you got the people yelling.
Metro.
The Metro class, right? They're yelling at you, and you're like, I hear you, but I don't hear you.
Well, I mean, by the time I went to the police academy, right, I was already a career, and it was just like, I was like, oh, sure, just tell me what you want me to do, because it's not, you're not gonna hurt my feelings.
So, okay, this is kind of a funny story. 2015, I went to the police, to a different police academy as a class supervisor, just to, mainly I wanted to see how the academy was run, and I wanted to see, why we were getting the recruits that we were getting. So right before the very first day, I meet the other two class supervisors, and they're like, hey, we really want to be hard on these kids. We want to go hard, yada, yada. And I'm like, that's not really my approach. I'm like, but if that's the way you guys are going to go, then I got to jump on board. So I'm not really sure. I don't remember what happened. I guarantee you the kids who were in the class, they'll remember me going full on crazy. But one of the kids screwed up, and I just dropped the bomb on them. And the whole class, like, you can see everybody's asshole just pucker. And they were like, holy cow. So end of the day, all the squad leaders were from the military, former military. And they were like, permission to speak. And I'm like, yeah, go ahead. They're all gathered around me, and they're like, were you in the military? And I kind of like looked around, and I go, play along. And they were like, got it. And they understood what was going on. And I'm like, hey, you guys have already been through this. You guys just need to corral your people in and make sure that they don't do stupid stuff, and we'll be fine. And those are my kids, and I still see them and talk to them fairly regularly. I actually treat them like they're my kids, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, my last position in 20th, so I was part of a team that did our tryouts. Because the way it works in the National Guard, if you weren't active to the SF, you can try out, and we'll send you to selection in the Q course and everything. But we actually pre-select. So we run a little weekend tryout, and we have 6 months to a year to train people up for selection. We don't send them to pass. So we have a really high pass rate. Basically, if they don't do something stupid like getting DUI, we know they're going to pass, make it to the Q course, or get hurt, right?
Sure.
So this tryout weekend is meant to be just complete and total hell. We've only got it for 3 days. Right? So in 3 days, we got to figure out if they're worth putting in the effort. It's not like we'd have it for a whole month like the real selection. And I was the guy that ran the smoke session. The big smoke session where you don't stop until people quit, right?
Yep.
And then we would pick people, select them, pre-select them, obviously. And we'd tell them when to report for their first drill as part of our trainees, our training team. And they'd have to sleep out in the woods. We would sleep, in the barracks. And actually usually like in NCO quarters, so we had like nice little rooms, right? They're out in the woods. And I was usually the first guy to show up in the morning because they'd get there the night before. So when I get there the night before, I'd be ready to go at 6 or something, same time. And I'd show up, and they'd all be like looking really nervous because I was the guy that smoked their bags, right? And I always walk up and go, hey guys, how you guys doing? Everybody sleep okay? All right, here's what we're going to do this weekend. And they're looking at me, and I'm like, that was just a job. Like, that's actually not my style.
Yeah.
Like, from here on out, it's SF. From here on out, either you meet the standard or you're gone. And I'm not going to yell at you at all. Like, it's just not, that's not how it works. And they're always kind of looking at, because the rest of the military is not like that, right? So they're always kind of looking in shock, and they're like, that was an act. I'm like, yeah, that was an act. I wanted you to be. I didn't want you to fail.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's, I don't particularly like to yell, but it usually is a circumstance that, some dumb shit's going on, and I'm like, okay, you're bringing it out. I'm like, just understand that's normally not how I am.
I still carry with me the influence of one of my drill subjects, and I don't remember his name. This was a long time ago, right? But he was the one that almost never yelled. And then when he did yell, everybody was like, oh, we really messed up. And I always just figured that was a better style. You know what I mean? That was a better way to go about things. It's to be the guy that if I yell, they know there's a reason why I'm there. It's not just to hear myself yell.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he was a martial artist, as a matter of fact. I mean, he was Bujinkan because it was, the late 80s, but he was still a martial artist.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We were talking about like pressure points early on, before we started. And you in the academy in the 90s?
Yeah, 97.
So there was a guy who was running the DT program, and I don't remember the guy's name. Bald older guy. He was a martial artist. Everybody told me like he would travel to Asia and sit under these waterfalls, essentially wearing nothing and meditate and whatnot. And so we were doing the pressure points, the phase or whatever in the academy. And my training partner was a big dude trying to do all these pressure points, and they weren't working, and he was getting pissed. And he raises his hands and he goes, "It's not working on this guy." So he stands up and he brings me to the front of the class, gymnasium full of recruits. And he's applying this pressure point and he's like shaking. He's just like, "Argh." And I'm like, just sitting there. I'm like, nothing. And he like pushes me away and he's like, "Well, there is a percentage of people that doesn't work on." And I'm thinking to myself, it didn't work on me. I'm like, this doesn't work on most people. I'm sorry. Like maybe a handful of other students who was working on, and I'm like, yeah, no. I'm like zero faith in pressure points.
A lot of that stuff I think can be like the garnish on top of your dish, right? It's like it's the oregano on top of your chili. Right?
Yep.
Right. Like clinch, like take a tie clinch, right? You can sink your hands in right there and get that little bit of extra. But if you're not also stacking their spine with weight and getting the right angle and kind of compressing them and taking away their ability to move, that pressure point's not doing it. It's just that little garnish.
Yep.
A little chef's kiss at the end.
Yep. Yeah, it's I don't know. I had very little faith in it myself, and then now you're trying to teach it, and you're like, some people here when I applied it worked on most people, but like, there were a handful of people that didn't work. I'm like, hey, don't worry about it. It doesn't work on me either. So,
well, and you applying it is different than the average recruiter. It is not, because there's a subtlety there to what angle you're putting the pressure in and the exact point, and it's not. How can I articulate this? In my opinion, the juice is not worth the squeeze for a training audience that will put in minimal practice.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like I said, even if you're going to put in the practice time, I think it's something that gives you a little bit of an added zing to your technique. It's not the technique itself. It's not going to do this.
Yeah.
It's like all those, and I'm not saying there's not good stuff in like reality saving, self-defense crowd, because there is good stuff in the crowd.
Sure.
But a lot of the dirty tricks, you're like, I don't know if I'd spend my training time focusing on that. I might work on, elbows and tie kicks before I started working on that stuff.
Yeah. I just had a conversation probably maybe almost a month ago now about like, I was teaching a class and a guy came up to me. He's like, well, what about like eye gouges and groin grabs? And I'm like, look, I'm not saying that eye gouge at the appropriate time wouldn't work, but I go, and same with a groin grab, but I go, if that's the basis of your program, like you're missing out on a lot of other things, right? Like you said, that's the topping, it's like, I'm like, you kind of, if you don't have some fundamental striking, some fundamental wrestling, like your groin grab or your high gout is really, it's going to just aggravate the piss out of this other guy. So,
well, I have my favorite pain compliance story that I got to share. This is Chicago.
Yeah, awesome.
So I'm going to change the names to protect both the guilty and the innocent. It is past 7 years, but I'm still going to do it anyway. So there was a guy on like the near west side, the gentrifying near west side of Chicago, but it hadn't really gentrified yet. This is well back some time. And basically, this man's career was robbing, raping, and we believe murdering prostitutes. That's what he did for a living. So we kind of wanted this. So I had just left court. I was still wearing this suit. I will not forget because I loved that suit and it never came. I never got that suit clean. And the guy had a gun. So my guys, I'm coming back from court and I'm actually headed to the station when the 10-1 comes out. And it's my guys, right? So I go over there, lights and sirens. And this particular gentleman was a very large man. Like, you could easily see him in the NFL, like in sparring competition. He wasn't a complete bust out, right? If he had like a different personality. And probably just as athletic as those guys. To this day, I thank God the man had no idea how to fight. If he'd known how to fight, it would have been way, way worse. All of my guys are trying their best to hurt him, and nothing is hurt. Like, he's just not, he just doesn't care.
Yeah.
Right? I watched one of our guys, who I'm not going to name, who had hit him in all the appropriate areas with a baton, and we were going to say had lawfully decided that the force was appropriate, hit him in the head as hard as he could. He bent that ass around this guy's skull till it looked like a horseshoe. And literally, the guy looks at him and goes, "Let's be professional." So I hop in the fight, right? And I wind up in this case, once again, let's just say that I decided the force was appropriate. I wound up doing a vascular neck restraint. I choked him because nothing. So I choked him unconscious. We get him loaded in the wagon, get him back to the station. Now we got to get him to the holding cell. I fight this guy all the way from the wagon into the holding cell, and there's 20 other coppers with me. None of them are. I mean, they're trying to help, but this will come back to your team tactics thing in a second.
Yeah.
They're trying very hard to help, but they're really not able to help. They're not helping. It's time to cuff him to the wall in the holding cell, and it is on. I wound up popping his shoulder completely out of socket. And he looks at me and he goes, "Come here." And he looks at me and he goes, "Oh, it's going to be like that." Who are you? I had to choke him out again. Like, nothing was going to work. And, this is why I think that they threw the baby out with the bathwater with chokes, right? Because there are people out there that will not stop fighting to turn their brand.
Yeah.
Like, they just won't. And this was one of those guys. Yeah, pain compliance for him. I popped his shoulder. His arm was hanging like Raggedy Ann, right? And he just didn't care at all. Didn't bother him, didn't faze him, not a bit.
Yeah, I've got a couple PCP, incidences, and you're like, this dude doesn't feel anything. He's just fighting for days. You're like, all right, it's not fun. Like we were fairly lucky because for us, for the most part, like you end up fighting a guy like that, we strapped him to the gurney and took him to the hospital. We didn't actually just bring him right to lockup because they were usually pretty fucked up after that. So, we'd end up bringing him to the hospital. You had a babysit, at the hospital, and then you bring him back. But Yeah, those were all the pre-team tactics days. Once we started employing team tactics and started working together, that was a huge game changer, because everybody knew their role. Like, so we were talking earlier about team tactics, and like I don't consider myself a salesman, right? But like every B cop could basically, sell anything if they're a good talker.
And that's something people don't realize. If you can't talk to people, you're not a good cop.
No.
I don't care how good you are at fighting, shooting.
Yeah,
if nobody will talk to you, you can't solve the crimes.
Yes, and it's one of the things I'm noticing. Especially this new generation of cops, like they don't know how to talk to people, and when they're thrusted in that position where they're forced to talk to people, they're like frozen. What do you mean I can't text this guy? No, you can't. You got to deal with this guy who's right in front of you. But yeah, my sell to admin and to especially like retired cops, or not retired, old timers, is basically like, look, in law enforcement, we all have checks and balances, right? And I go, and for the most part, we're doing team tactics anyways. And, I go, what's a room entry? That's a team tactic. What's a felony stop or high risk vehicle stop? That's a team tactic, right? Most agencies, if you had a guy who's got any amount of cash on you, you have two people counting the money. That's a team tactic.
Yeah.
Why is it that when we go to arrest somebody, we don't have a team tactic? Why is it that we only train solo officer tactics in the mat room? I go, most arrests, involve multiple officers. So at the very least, we have two. And like I said, we've been doing it for just now over 11 years, super high success rate. And I'm seeing it, through the organizations that I'm teaching with. They're having high success rates also. So there's, again, it's just having two officers on the same page. And I had this quick little story. I went down to consult for another agency. I'm there for like the first hour, and old salty lieutenant comes in, and he's he clearly doesn't want to be there. You could just tell, body language. When he walks in, like the mood changes in the whole room. I'm like, okay, first break. I know he's going to go get a cup of coffee. So what do? I'm in there making myself a cup of coffee. He comes walking in, and I said, "Hey, LT, are you a street boss or are you a desk boss?" And right off the bat, he was pissed. He goes, he's like, "I'm a street boss." I'm like, "Okay, what shift?" He's like, 3 to 11s. I'm like, "Oh, you probably got a bunch of young kids on this shift, right?" He's like, "Yeah, they're all young. They don't have any experience." Okay. I go, "So that means you probably got to go to a lot of calls with them, right?" He's like, "Yeah, pretty much every call." I'm like, "Okay. So let me ask you, you pull up on a call and you see Junior rolling around with some dirtbag, and I go, you going to sit in your car, call for backup? Or are you going to jump out and help?" And now he's thoroughly pissed. He's like, yeah, I'm going to get out. I'm going to, get involved. I'm like, okay, cool. I go, let's just say things start really going south. Junior has to shoot this guy because you guys aren't working together. He kind of like pulls back from his cup of coffee and he goes, "You got me. You got me." Finishes coffee, goes back out into the mat room, literally changes the entire attitude in the room. And you see the younger guys going, "What's up with LT?" He's getting all the reps. He's asking good questions, and he's engaged. And I'm like, my buddy comes in and goes, "What the hell did you do?" And I go, I got your LT engaged.
You got to buy in. You got to buy in on the board.
That's what you wanted, right? He's like, yeah. He's like, "How'd you do that?" I'm like, sometimes you got to pick at it a little bit. So, Yeah, I do the same. I treat everybody, I don't care if you got clusters on your shoulders or stars or, I treat you all the same. I'm just me, and I'll train you. I'm going to talk the same way. But it's team tactics to me should be the foundation of every DT program, every police department's program, and then you can build off that. You absolutely need solo officer tactics, but when shit goes sideways, you need to work together. That's at least that's my opinion.
And I would say that's probably the biggest failing historically in my career in people's use of force. Not firearms, hands-on force, right?
Sure.
Up to and including like less lethal stuff is the lack of coordinated effort, right? It needs to be. We always talk about how we don't want it to be a fair fight. We don't want it to be a fair fight. Like that's not the point of it, right?
Right.
So we need to be working together in a way that optimizes our chances of handling it well. And this kind of ties into something that I always thought, and I'll be honest, I was thinking this more in the context of the individual officer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Probably because in my experience, even when I was in groups, I usually handled the hands-on stuff pretty much like people were there helping, but they weren't really, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I'm not, people listening to this that used to work for me, I'm not knocking anybody. And I'm not saying that guys doing a good job helping, but it wasn't really a team-based helping. It wasn't coordinated at the time. And that's not their fault. It's just the way we were trained to operate, right? SWAT was better, obviously, but as far as, other units. So I'm not knocking anybody by saying it, but it's the truth. I just kind of always expected, because my worst case scenario was I might wind up working with people, supervising another team, working with people I didn't normally work with, showing up on a job. It was a patrol job, and I was a sergeant in a unit, right? Where I might have to handle it by myself because of the skill level and experience level of the people there, right? And once again, not a knock on it, it's just reality.
Yep.
But even in the context of one officer, I've always really strongly held this belief, and I even wrote a paper on it, that most of what people see when they see uses of force that either look bad or are truly bad, most of that arises from a lack of training. The better trained an officer is, the better they're able to handle a situation without it getting to them. And not always, I'm not saying that. There's situations that are just going to go off the rails no matter what. But the better trained you are, the more you can minimize it. The less you have to injure the other person, the less likely you are to get injured, and the less likely you are to go into basically panic mode because you want to go home. And I'm not blaming anybody for going into panic mode because they want to go home, because what that means is they weren't trained properly.
Yeah.
They weren't given the tools they need to be able to handle it without having that management.
Yeah. I can't agree more. I got departments who don't provide any training for their officers other than they ship them out to a mandated course and expect them to be an expert in it. And,
I love that. Well, you're the subject matter expert. You're 40 hours.
Right.
In what world does 40 hours make you an expert at anything?
only in public safety, right? Law enforcement. Not to get totally off topic, but I'm constantly asked about, do you offer a 40-hour certification? And I'm like, no, I don't. It's probably inevitably going to come, but that will be only to very select people who are going through a mentorship program. Because, my program's grappling heavy. So if you're not grappling on your own time and dime, you're not even on the list. Like, even if you were on the list and you decided, I don't need this anymore, you're off the list. Like, I'm sorry, I'm not even going to consider you. To me, building your own skill set is huge. And if you're not spending your own time and dime to do it, it's kind of on you. It's not on me. And I don't want the fallback from that. I'm not primarily doing that because I don't want to deal with the fallback. Otherwise, I wouldn't be dealing with law enforcement training. But, I've had several officers say, well, my department doesn't provide this, yada, yada. And I go, it's still your problem. I go, then if they're not going to provide it for you, then you need to go seek it yourself. And they're like, well, I don't have time for that. No, I call bullshit,
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. I have positions where I work 60, 80 hours a week and I still fit stuff in. It's
right. It's a priority. What's your priority?
In a perfect world, it would be great if the institution you worked for, whether military or law enforcement, gave you all the training you need. Unless you're in an SMU, and I would argue even there, that's not really happening. You're closer like an SMU, but there's still stuff you should do. There's still stuff you should research, learning, and figuring out. And, like I was SF, but I spent my career in 20th, which is a national guard group, so being a part-time SWAT team guy, right? Mm-hmm. There is no way I could have stayed sharp on all the stuff I needed to stay sharp on if I just waited for drill. Like, it's not going to happen. I would have been a dirtbag. I would not have been keeping up with the team if I'd done that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we drilled a lot more than other units drilled. It was not just, 2 days a month. But even so, it's still part-time. So, you got to shoot on it. You got to research and read and think about tactics. Like I used to geek out on historical battles, figure out lessons, and learn from that. Like, you need to be doing all of that if you want to be a master of your craft. And law enforcement too. Like you need to be, if you're an investigator, you need to be reading books on interrogations and evidence collection, case law. If you're a SWAT guy, you need to be shooting competitively in some form, at least occasionally, and working on that. You need to be dry firing, right? You need to have a fitness program that's going to keep you where you need to be. It isn't dependent on department time.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. Like my old agency, I got to work out on my own time, and my old agency hires me to teach jiu-jitsu. So these guys get to train jiu-jitsu on duty if they're working, depending on the time frame. I would have loved to train jiu-jitsu while I was at work.
Yeah.
To squeeze in an extra session a week or whatever, or just my own drilling time. But I've been, I got a buddy who's like, oh, you're an expert. And I'm like, dude, I'm not an expert, man. I'm still learning. I'm still trying to figure stuff out. I don't ever consider myself an expert. I love, I ask at the end of class, I'm like, hey, you guys have any questions? Like, let's do stump the chump. Please ask me a question. And, if nobody's ever really stumped me, but they forced me to think. And I love that because it's a constant evolution, just getting better. And, that's all I ask these guys. So like, hey, look, you don't have to. So another quick little story. I used to be a part of a text string of a bunch of instructors, and I would kind of send them what I was listening to or what I was reading or what if I got a new white paper I was looking at or whatever it was. And I'd send it to them. And then finally one of these kids was like, how do you find time for all this? He's like, I don't have time for all this. And I'm like, look, I'm not expecting you to do what I do. But if you want to get to the position where I'm finally at, I go, it took years to do all this. And so I'm just providing you these things, for you to learn on your own. You open it up, look at it, and it doesn't interest you, close it, move on. Also, I don't have a life. This is my life. This is all I do. So, that's the OCD part. It's not healthy. And so I just tell people like, if you got other things to do, go do it. But when you have 3 minutes of downtime, go watch this video or read this short little article, whatever, right? I'm not looking for guys to be mini me's. I'm just trying to make a better you.
And I think there's, for my civilian listeners, there's an important point here that I kind of touched on in the podcast, but I don't expect everyone to want to go as far down the rabbit as I have. You know what I mean? And it's got to be a balance of what is your level of participation? How much time are you going to put into this based on everything else you have going on in life? And that's okay. Right? As a civilian, especially, that's okay. And it's not up to me to judge. It's up to you to make the decision and stick with it, right? But I lose that perspective really quickly when it comes to, especially like SWAT guys. I'm like, your job is potentially hostage rescue, which is an incredibly difficult thing to do. So if you're not spending a significant amount of time trying to figure out how to do better than this, you really shouldn't be on a SWAT team. You know, it's not just a cool uniform. Like the job is very serious, very sobering, and it's never really good enough. You know, I think it's kind of the way I look at it. And I know that sounds kind of, there are people out there that get upset by that, but hey, you might be on a part-time team in some small town, but you know what? It could still happen. Bad things go down in small towns, right?
Yeah.
And are you going to be ready, or are you just not going to be ready?
Yeah, the most of my kids who are on the SWAT team, like, they take it really serious. You know, and you know, I'm thankful for that, because I look at it as like, you know, I don't want to hear the bad news. I've already gotten the bad news of one of my kids from the academy class. You know, like, was it not even like 8 months out? You know, he got shot in the gangway. He's got a brain injury. You know, I already got that bad news, and I'm like, I don't want to see that. I don't want to go to the hospital. I definitely don't want to go to the funeral. So, you know, I want you to take it seriously.
And I was really fortunate with Chicago, because the SWAT team over the years there became something really special. Like there were kids on that team that if you taught them land nav could probably have walked into an SMU. Like, they were talented, athletic, hardworking, you know, and dedicated to it. And plenty of training time on the clock, which was a good thing. There were some really sharp kids, and I'm really happy I got to have that in my career, because it felt good, especially when I wound up being the guy that brought a lot of the kids on. You know, you look around and you're like, and I had the same experience in SF. I'll never forget the last Christmas party I went to before I retired from there. And I went to a couple after I retired. This is the last one I went to before I retired. They wound up moving the unit to Indiana, and then I wasn't able to do it. But I'm looking around with my team sergeant, Rick, who was also training everybody. And we're looking around, and we're like, we brought over half these people into the company. Like we are officially old. Like, these are our kids.
Yeah, it's funny, because, like, you know, I'm still, like, you know, actively teaching law enforcement, and I see some of these kids coming on the job, and I start talking to them, and I'm like, holy shit, you're younger than my kids. I'm like, you were born after my kids were born. I'm like, oh my God, am I old?
I got a funny one. I don't think I've said this in the podcast before, but if I have, I hope the listeners forgive me, because it's such a good story about becoming a Ranger, right? We brought a kid on. This was, I think, the last selection I ran before I retired. It was either the last or, like, you know, one of the last two. It was right. And we bring this kid on, and he had been in the 82nd Airborne long enough to be an NCO and have 2 combat tours. Then it takes a couple of years to get fired up by Chicago. So there had to be a couple of year gap in there, right? And you got to be on 3 years to even try out this one. It takes at least a year to get there. He wasn't born yet when I went to Ranger. That was the day I officially knew I was old. I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
My beret is older.
Yeah. I've, you know, I get some of the old jokes. They're like, wait, when did you start the school? Start law enforcement? I'm like, well, a long time ago. I'm like, you're making me feel old. I'm like, shut the fuck up. we got shit to do.
Well,
Yeah.
honest. Like I just genuinely want to help them avoid a bunch of the dead ends, stupid mistakes, and wrong turns I made trying to figure this stuff out. That's really that's my purpose now that I'm retired. Like, I'm just trying to pass it forward so that they can figure things out quicker than I did. You know?
Yeah.
I'd be better prepared than I was.
I was just having a conversation with my buddy Sam Ferguson. He's out of Lexington, Kentucky, but he's a Illinois boy. And we were just shooting shit back and forth. And then I said, I said, I still have an itch to compete. And he goes, bro, you don't have to do that. He's like, there's no need for you to do that. You're not, my own physical conditioning right now. And he's like, your job is to just mentor and pass on the information to the young guys that are coming on. He's like, and he's just a kid to me. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. But wise words from a kid, and but I still have that itch, and this is one of the reasons why, I saw you post you've been using the Ace VR.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons why I bought it, because I was like, okay, well, I'm mildly crippled. I'm like, maybe I can get into competition shooting, and I really enjoy the Ace VR. I'm kind of limited in some space, and I got a couple other guys who are in the local scene here competing, both cops and jiu-jitsu practitioners and competition shooters, and they're like, bugging me like, hey, just do it. And I'm like, look, the only thing that's holding me back, it's my ego, but it's also safety reasons. And it's
try steel challenge.
So that's kind of where I'm probably going to end up starting, but like moving around and not being able to feel my feet with a live pistol, it concerns me. Right. So yeah, it's one of those things. It does concern me, and I just don't want to trip and fall and have an errant round go off. So
yeah, while you're healing up, I would say just do steel challenge. It's great for like draws and transitions, and it's fun.
Yeah,
I'm doing a steel challenge match. Actually, one of my wife's yoga friends is getting into shooting, and she wanted to go do a match, so we're taking her to a steel challenge match on Saturday.
Nice. Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm kind of like leaning towards. So, but yeah, and then, the other issue is I got to get a new gun.
What do you have?
What's been in the news lately a lot?
That, like, all that panic about that, I think we should just drop it.
Yeah, I'll be perfectly honest.
Dude, that was the dad joke. You didn't even get it.
Yeah. I got it. I was in a group chat and was telling people, like, look, I'm fairly brand agnostic. I don't really care. I just need whatever it is I'm carrying to go bang when it needs to go bang. And so this was a duty gun that we were carrying, and I conservatively shot, in the 8 years I carried it, 20 to 30,000 rounds through it. Not just my duty gun, but then my off-duty gun. And, we haven't had one problem. I mean, knock on wood, not one. And I would say probably the department's probably shot conservatively 200,000 rounds through all the department guns. Not a problem. So yeah, but I don't own one.
but I've shot them and they shoot nice. They've got a nice trigger. They've got good recoil impulse. They feel good in my hand. They do shoot nice. There's obviously something going on. I don't know to what percentage. I think it's probably pretty small. And I do think people being people, I think some of what we heard is people trying to jump on a bandwagon for money. But that doesn't mean legitimate things haven't also happened, because there's legitimate things on video.
Yep.
So that's just that is my highly uninformed take on it.
Yeah. I don't follow it super closely, but I'll see something posted. I'll read through it. I definitely won't carry that thing appendix. And it's just one of those things like, what? It's just something I got to do. And so I just got to get off my ass and go buy a new gun, train with it, and just do it. Like, just like anything else, like, just get off your ass, get off the couch, get to the mat room, go train.
All right, so I got a question for you.
Sure.
If you were going to give, and this is going to be it's actually a two-part question. So same question, one different target audience, different groups you're addressing. Brand new cop and a civilian who wants to learn how to defend themselves. What will be your recommendation for predominantly empty-hand combatives, but also with the thought that you have to integrate tools as well? Like, how would you tell them to start? What's your roadmap for how they start? Because, a lot of times people want to get into this stuff and they really aren't sure where to begin. And they want to begin somewhere that's going to complicate things. It might be a decent thing to work on later, but it's probably not the priority. You know what I mean?
Right. So I have this conversation a lot, primarily with cops. And I push jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, primarily because for an average adult going into an average adult here, average cop we'll talk about cops. Your average cop comes on the job relatively fit, and fairly young, early mid-20s, probably fairly athletic. But if you haven't taken some hard falls on the ground, like going to a wrestling club or a judo club, you're probably going to go to the first class, get dropped 100 plus times that first night. And then you're probably going to take some Advil and be like, I don't know if that was worth it. And you'll probably never go back. I will say, if you go to a wrestling club, you probably won't even make it through warm-ups before you even getting dropped onto the mats. So I think in general, wrestling and judo, which I love, are just too hard to start with. And so I push people into jiu-jitsu, whether it's a competition gym, I don't really care, just start. And then from there, once you get a couple months in and you start seeing, okay, well, that guy wrestled or that guy did judo, start taking some privates with those guys and then start learning some wrestling and some judo. You also need to do some striking. You'll probably find somebody who's done, Muay Thai or boxing. And if not, you've probably developed some contacts within the gym to go, hey, I want to do Muay Thai twice a week, once a week, whatever. And they'll lead you into that direction. And I would probably give the same advice to a civilian, depending on age. Integrating weapons is kind of a special thing, and I'm not for law enforcement. Integrating weapons, I think, is a must because you carry a gun on your hip every day, and you have all these other tools, and then you don't know what they're carrying, right? And so that is a special integration. You got to find somebody who's in the combative realm of that, right?
Yeah, I always recommend civilians.
Yeah. I mean, people ask me all the time, I go, hey, the first person, and probably the most accessible would be Craig. He travels 40 plus weeks a year. You're probably within a day's drive of somewhere where he's teaching. And it's well worth every dime that you spend and the amount of time that you spend. But if you can't get into Craig's class, go train with Cliff, go train with Cecil. Anybody who's in the Combatives Association, go train with them.
I like Tony Flower's stuff too as a bridge to your techniques. I like Tony a lot.
Sure. Yeah.
Especially for civilians, because like, once again, here's kind of my thought on it. The better trained you are, the more you can override those natural responses. But for a civilian trying to pick up a variety of things quickly in the beginning, I think his stuff is really, really good. I think it still has value for everyone. Don't get me wrong. Don't get mad at me, Tony. I love it. I think it has a lot of value for everyone, but I think it's especially valuable. I think it's really good for people that are trying to figure out what to do when, the proverbial shit hits the fan.
Yes. I think, for civilians, in here, whether you're armed with a pistol or not, whether you just want some general self-defense, I think attending an ECQC and learning managing unknown contacts and vertical grappling, or just understanding hey, we need to stay on our feet, and that's where I think even my own experience through ECQC, I decided to clinch right away, and that was a mistake. There's definite times and places to manage space with your hands, and so I would pretty much give the same template outline to the civilian. That
I think the only thing I might add, or we haven't talked about yet, is some sort of Filipino stuff, just to kind of really almost more to understand how bad it is to be on the other end of the knife. Like, people have this fantasy of, weapons disarms. Every art teaches weapons disarms, but they teach it because you got to try something.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, it reminds me of in basic training, we had all these, battle drills. One was immediate action in case of nuclear attack. It told you how to lay on the ground and which way to point, basically cover your genitals with your hands. And I'm like, they're just giving us something to do while we die.
Yeah.
That's all they're doing. And a lot of knife defense
are going to fry just, seconds later after the rest of them fry.
They're just keeping you from panicking while you fry. And I think a lot of knife defense, like, people really underestimate how bad a problem that is. Like, it is not something, and even if you do pull it off, you're going to the hospital. Most likely.
Yeah. I've done very little Kali, and I realize I have really slow reflexes. My hands are very slow comparatively. And the little I did of it, I did enjoy it. But I almost think I couldn't stay focused long enough because there was so much stuff coming at me. And I don't know if that was the instructor or his methodologies, or actually that's just how it is. I don't know, but yeah.
Well, that's kind of one of the things I like about it too. And we're getting off the piece, I apologize, dude. But so one of the things I think that is really good about competitive shooting for the self-defense shooter is how fast you go in competitive shooting. Because you're not, except for certain outliers, there are outliers, but except for those outliers, you should never go that fast in the war. You should be splitting that fast, you should be moving that fast. I mean, you might run from one spot to another that fast, but you're not going to be running up and ignoring cover and shooting right away. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Most likely. except for outliers. There are situations. But what it does is it gets your brain used to working faster than you actually have to. So when you turn the volume back down, you're very comfortable. And one of the cool things about FMA is that the end of that stick is going so much faster than a hand does that it takes a serious amount of time to even get to where you can see what the stick is doing at the end when you're in close range like that.
Yes.
And I think that that's a benefit, because then when you go back to hands, you're like, oh, that jab at cross really isn't as fast as it felt like it was before.
Yeah. I didn't see how fast it was, but I felt how fast it was. I was like, where the hell did that come from? God, that stung.
So one of the things I trained in Chicago, right? And it's an art that gets a lot of hate, right? But it was Aikido. But it was a lineage of Toyota Shihan over at the Japanese Cultural Center. It was not pretty flowery Aikido. Like it looked like judo with joint locks, and it was rough, right? But I remember working on Tatsudori, sword defense. And I remember thinking, the chances of anyone actually pulling that off, like if you're empty-handed, it's one thing if you're tied up, suba to suba, handguard to handguard, and then you grab the guy's arm and that's different. Like that I could see happening all day long if you're good. But the guy's swinging a meter-long razor at you and you have nothing. Like the chances of that actually working are extremely slim. But as a training aid, it's got the same kind of velocitization effect, I think.
Sure.
And once again, you might as well try, because he's going to cut you either way. It's kind of like gun disarms, right? Most gun disarms aren't going to work. But what are you going to do? Just give up?
Yeah. I mean, exactly. And that's so on like Japanese swordsmanship and sword fighting. Like I grew up at a Buddhist temple and going, like watching the old samurai movies on 35 millimeter, right? And not knocking my parents, they did the best that they could, but we were relatively here. I never went hungry, but they weren't rich. We were lower middle class at best. So the ability to do the judo and the kenjutsu and iaido that I wanted to do wasn't there. My parents stuck me into scouting, which I'm not knocking, but it's not really what I wanted to do. I really wanted to go into the martial path. But yeah, I mean, I love those movies, and I love, like, I'm like, oh, cool. I'm like, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do. And I would still like to do that. I just don't have the time.
Yeah, you can't fit everything in. Yeah, it's impossible. But I would argue that you are doing that. You're just doing it in a different time and place with a different ROE and a different set of tools, right?
Right.
And that's kind of how, like, I'm not play acting at being a samurai, right? I mean, Christ, look at me. I'm 6'3", I've got reddish gray hair, I'm built like the Mystic Link. I'm basically a Sasquatch. I'm the opposite thing. Like the complete opposite end of the human spectrum from a samurai, right? But when I was a kid, like I started training in Japanese martial arts as a kid, little kid, back when it wasn't a kid's thing. And we would have Samurai Sundays at the dojo where they'd bring out the projector and we watched all the old Kurosawa films, right?
Yep.
And like it worked. Like my hero as a teenager was Musashi. Like I wanted to wander the world and rule people.
Yes.
But I think that way of looking at things, when you strip it of cultural context, okay? So take the cultural context away, because it's really no different than the way a Knight Templar lived, or one of the Spartan hoplites, right? Like, it's really not any different, you know.
Mm-hmm.
A centurion, Roman army. Like, it's the good people in the professions of arms throughout history, including civilians who take it seriously. Like, I'm not even just saying it as the military.
Right.
Have all basically lived the same way with different tools in a different cultural context, I think.
Yes.
And I think there's lessons to be learned from that. And I also think that for those of us, myself included, who get frustrated with most people's lack of serious commitment to their training, if we take a deep breath and look at things like the quote from Heraclitus, it's always been that way. I mean, the samurai movies, how much of a cliche is it in the samurai movies that most of them are bumbling people that can't really fight? You know, then along comes Mifune and like, it's like sticking them in a Cuisinart.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I think all the warrior cultures had the same, virtues, and, that's actually where I got rectitude from, you've probably seen, right, Bushido, the code of the samurai, right?
Inazo and Itobi.
Yep. I happen to be hunting for a business name, right? It was like a month, like just me trying to figure out what the heck I wanted to call this and what it is I was trying to do. And I was cleaning up a bookshelf and I cracked the book open, and right, the first virtue is rectitude, right? Righteousness, justice. And I'm like, there's a name. Like, it literally fell right in my lap. I'm like, cool. I'm like, got it.
And I think that's a good pick too, because like one of the things that I'm really personally proud of in both my careers is that while I did probably much more violence than most of my peers during my career, just because of the nature of my personality and the positions I would put myself in, I never did it to be a bully. You know what I mean? I never did it to be cruel or to enjoy it. It was always done because it was the proper thing to do.
Right thing to do. Yep.
And I had a conversation recently, and I'm actually writing a blog post about this with a friend of mine who used to write for Black Belt magazine. And he talks a lot about how he thinks there's like a higher degree than normal of sociopathy in warrior classes. Now remember, he's an academic. He trains, but he's an academic. He's not a professional. Great guy. Fantastic. And I actually don't think he's incorrect. I think that, look at Musashi, right? South Europe, had his first duel at 12 and fought 60 duels to the death. That is not a typical personality, right? But he also did art and sculpture and literature and was cultured and was kind to people too, at least later in life.
Yes.
Earlier on, he was probably a thug, but and I think that those warrior codes exist as mechanisms of control, which is both a good thing and a bad thing. If corrupted, it becomes a way for those with political power to use the warriors to do bad things because they follow rules, right? That's the negative aspect.
Mm-hmm.
But the positive aspect is that you commit yourself to that and you have that talent for violence. It helps you be a better person and use it properly rather than letting it get used for the wrong reasons, the wrong ways, the wrong way. And I think it's really important that we instill those virtues in the younger people in the professions of arms too. Because it's very popular right now to be separate. And that can lead itself, and I'm not saying a certain amount of cynicism isn't healthy. It absolutely is. But when you abandon values for the sake of cynicism, you open yourselves up for things like my life.
Correct. Yeah. You get some guys who are, on the job, and then they become jaded, and then they, you start hearing stories, and I have to stop them before they finish the story. I'm like, look, if the outcome of this was not righteous, I don't want to hear the rest of this. I've seen enough in my lifetime. I don't need to see or hear anymore. Like, we part of the profession, right, is in the hole that we're in is from the stuff that predates us, right? From, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And what cops were doing back then, that is now snowballing us currently, right? And so like if you're telling me a story and you give a guy a little extra, dude, I don't need to hear about that. I'm like, keep that between you, you and whoever, right? But that's not what I'm teaching. I'm teaching you to do the right thing at the right time, at the right place. And we're all human. We all make mistakes.
Yeah.
But I don't need to hear your story and how happy you are about giving this guy extra. That's
good faith mistake is different than intention.
1,000%. Yeah.
And I actually have a theory on PTSD. I think that there's only 3 ways you get PTSD as a soldier. One is survivor's guilt. That's the hardest to assume, right? That kind of gets us all if our career's long enough and full of enough action, right?
Yep.
2 is the person in the military who wasn't trained for what he wound up doing. The mechanic that wound up getting ambushed and fighting his way out, getting a medal because he killed a bunch of bad guys. But that wasn't what he was trained for. He had never made the mental math ahead of time to prepare his psyche for that. So that's 2. And both of those are not the fault of the person who has PTSD, right?
Yep.
But I think the 3rd is when you commit an act of when you do violence to another human being and you know it's wrong, eventually that comes home to us.
Yep.
And I think it's important that we teach the younger kids the dangers of it, right? Like it's not, I mean, we are entrusted to do violence at the end of society. So violence done for the appropriate reason and the appropriate amount, there's nothing ethically wrong with it. Whether you're talking wartime or as a cop, it's the other stuff, I think.
Yeah. Yep. Righteous violence is different. Yeah.
Well, all right, my friend. I've had a great conversation with you, but we are about to run out of time thanks to my technical difficulties in the beginning. I'd love to have you on and continue the conversation, though. I'd love to have you on again if you're up for that.
Awesome.
Real quick, let everybody know how to get a hold of you and set up training for their agency.
Like I said, I'm based here out of the Chicagoland area. You just go to rectitudetraining.com. I'm on social media, Rectitude Training LLC. Just hit me up. Yeah, I'll get back to you. It's just a one-man band, so I do everything.
All right. Well, for everybody out there who's thinking about it, I definitely recommend his stuff. As you can tell by the conversation, I think this guy's got some good ideas. So seek him out, make your officers better, and let's schedule you coming back on. We'll finish the conversation on camera this time.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it.
All right. Hope everybody enjoyed the episode, and I will talk to everybody later.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Way is in Training. Please come back again as we explore how training makes us better at our craft and better in our everyday lives. See all of you soon.